In the summer of 2025, American families find themselves staring at grocery receipts in disbelief. The backyard burger, once a symbol of affordability and tradition, is now a luxury. Ground beef, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, climbed to an average of $13.49 per kilogram in June, the highest level ever recorded. Just a year ago, it hovered closer to $11.99. Today, a family of four pays nearly $7.99 a pound for meat that cost barely $4.99 not long ago. Nearly 90% of Americans say they are stressed about grocery prices. It's not just inflation, it's policy. Behind the sticker shock lies a seismic political gamble. President Donald Trump, doubling down on his America First doctrine, slapped a 50% tariff on Brazilian beef, cutting off supply from the United States' single largest foreign source. In 2024, Brazil accounted for more than a quarter of U.S. beef imports, shipping over 229,000 tons worth nearly $1 billion. By early 2025, those imports peaked, covering the gaps left by America's own dwindling herds, which had fallen to their lowest since 1961 due to drought and high feed costs. But after Trump's tariff, the flow collapsed. Imports plunged 80% in just 3 months. The fallout has been brutal. Wholesale beef prices have risen by 21% since January, with consumer cuts climbing 8 to 12% across the board. Every link in the chain is feeling the squeeze. Meat packers bidding higher for cattle, retailers raising shelf prices, and burger chains shrinking portions or hiking menu costs. For households, that translates to an extra $1,200 a year spent just to keep meat on the table. Now, a bigger question looms. If Brazil pivots away from the US and deepens ties with Canada, does Trump's tariff strategy end up strengthening America's northern neighbor while leaving US families paying the price for his gamble? By July 2025, the numbers told the story of collapse. Imports from Brazil, which had peaked at nearly 48,000 tons in April, plunged to less than 10,000 tons 3 months later. An 80% nosedive in supply left the US short of nearly 400,000 tons of beef annually, equal to 4 to 5% of domestic consumption. On paper, that might seem small. In practice, it's devastating. That shortfall translates into $1 to $1.3 billion in lost trade value and a ripple effect that has distorted everything from supermarket prices to fast food menus. The World Trade Organization has already received Brazil's formal complaint, accusing Washington of breaching international rules with the 50% tariff. But a WTO ruling could take years. Meanwhile, US consumers don't have the luxury of waiting. The impact is immediate. Beef is scarcer, pricier, and harder to source. Retailers are reporting smaller sales volumes even as prices rise. Processors are watching their margins collapse as boxed beef prices soar. And restaurants, especially fast food chains, admit costs are climbing faster than they can adjust menus. Brazil, however, isn't standing still. Instead of pleading for access to US markets, it's quietly redirecting supply northward. Canada, which reopened its beef market in late 2024, imported $39 million worth of Brazilian beef that year and saw a 44% surge in the first quarter of 2025 alone. Ottawa is also reopening talks with Mercosur, the South American trade bloc that includes Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay, to expand agricultural trade. While Canada's demand is smaller than America's, the symbolism is massive. As Washington closes doors, Canada is opening them. For US households, this means higher grocery bills and no quick fix. For Canada, it's an opportunity to strengthen supply chains and present itself as the more stable, reliable partner in North America. The irony is stark. A tariff meant to punish Brazil is now giving both Brazil and Canada the leverage to outmaneuver Washington, leaving American families to foot the bill. The implications of this pivot stretch far beyond the beef market. Losing Brazilian supply means losing the core ingredient in America's fast food identity: ground beef. Millions of burgers, once the cheapest meal for working families, are now premium priced. According to USDA data, wholesale beef prices jumped 21% since January, pushing consumer cuts up between 8% and 12% year over year. For a middle-class family, that's a direct hit to disposable income. For the restaurant industry, it's a breaking point. Some burger chains are quietly cutting patty sizes to save costs, while others are testing plant-based substitutes out of desperation. But the story doesn't end there. Canada is seizing this moment to reinforce its role as the quiet counterweight to Trump's tariff chaos. Prime Minister Mark Carney has made it clear Ottawa won't sign a bad deal, even under US pressure. Instead, Canada is diversifying trade flows, expanding agricultural imports, and investing heavily in long-term resilience. Beyond beef, Canada is pouring billions into Arctic infrastructure, Indigenous partnerships, and clean energy exports, all designed to strengthen sovereignty and reduce reliance on the United States. This is not just trade policy, it's a strategic reset. By positioning itself as a stable hub for global supply chains, Canada is capitalizing on Trump's unpredictability. And it's working. As the US wrestles with empty shelves and angry consumers, Canada is quietly strengthening its relationships with both South America and Asia. Brazil gets a new buyer, Canada gains leverage, and Washington looks increasingly isolated. Economists warn that the shortfall of Brazilian beef is only the beginning. If US tariffs extend to other imports like aluminum, copper, or autos, as Trump has hinted, consumers could face spiraling prices across the board. For now, it's burgers and steaks. Tomorrow, it may be cars, beer, or even smartphones. Trump's message is about strength, but the reality on the ground is weakness, frustration, and an America forced to pay more for less. The heart of this conflict lies in Trump's worldview: transactional, short-term, and headline-driven. Since returning to office, he has announced deals with Japan, the Philippines, Indonesia, and the UK. Fast, flashy agreements cutting tariffs to win quick applause. But while Trump courts new partners, Canada is being sidelined, even punished. On March 4th, Washington slapped 25% tariffs on Canadian goods. By June, steel and aluminum tariffs doubled to 50%. Now Trump threatens a sweeping 35% tariff on nearly all Canadian exports unless Ottawa caves by August 1st. To Canadian officials, this isn't reciprocity, it's bullying. Ottawa has responded with counter tariffs, reindustrialization measures, and even grassroots boycotts of US goods. Flights from Canada to the US are down more than 25% this summer. Liquor boards in Ontario and Quebec have quietly shifted shelves away from American alcohol. In Vancouver, Buy Canadian campaigns are gaining traction. It's a silent, civilian-led resistance, but it has bite. US tourism, retail, and hospitality sectors are already reporting steep declines in Canadian visitors and spending. Yet the most important move isn't loud at all. It's structural. Canada is investing heavily in Arctic infrastructure, passing Bill C-5 to fast-track development in Inuit regions. Ottawa has pledged over $6 billion for radar systems, transport corridors, and rare earth mining. This isn't just economic policy, it's national defense. By working directly with Indigenous communities under constitutionally protected agreements, Canada is ensuring that future access to Arctic minerals, lithium, cobalt, rare earths, cannot be dictated by Washington or Beijing. Here's the paradox. While Trump pushes tariffs as a blunt weapon, Canada is quietly building the foundations of long-term power, sovereignty in the Arctic, control over critical minerals, diversified trade partners, a reputation as the stable alternative to America's volatility. Trump may see tariffs as leverage, but in practice, Canada is flipping them into opportunities, reshaping itself as a North American anchor while America stumbles through its own economic traps. The calendar adds urgency. August 1st looms as Trump's self-imposed deadline. Unless Canada signs a new deal, sweeping 35% tariffs are set to strike. In Washington, the message is clear. America is done waiting. But across the border, Carney is unmoved. His government insists no deal is better than a bad one. Instead of desperation, Canada projects resolve. Nearly 30% of Canadian exporters have already redirected goods to other markets. Over 37% are sourcing components from non-US suppliers. This isn't short-term maneuvering, it's a systemic shift away from American dependence. Canadian officials are also looking ahead. In 2026, CUSMA faces a mandatory joint review, a chance to renegotiate the entire North American framework. Ottawa wants to enter those talks from a position of strength, not weakness. Concessions today could cripple Canada's leverage tomorrow. That's why the strategy is deliberate. Endure the tariffs now, but secure sovereignty, Arctic dominance, and clean energy exports for decades to come. Meanwhile, Canadian public sentiment is hardening. Boycotts of US goods and travel aren't just symbolic, they're reshaping consumer habits. In Nevada, Canadian tourists once accounted for 30% of international visitors. This summer, that number has plunged, costing millions in revenue. Across US states reliant on Canadian spending, from Florida to New Hampshire, the pain is spreading. Washington may call Canadians mean and nasty, but the truth is more sobering. Quiet consumer choices are inflicting real economic consequences. This is the paradox of Trump's approach. He demands results now, driven by headlines and deadlines. Carney, however, is playing a long game, building alliances with Mexico, negotiating with Mercosur, and investing in domestic resilience. The result is a profound shift in North American trade. For the first time in generations, Canada is no longer negotiating from a place of dependence, but from strength. And if Washington doesn't recalibrate soon, it risks not only losing its closest ally, but also watching its influence across the continent unravel.